Is Florida no longer a paradise for retirees? 4 states they're moving to in 2026. What if the most famous retirement state in America is no longer the smartest retirement move? For decades, the answer felt obvious. If you wanted sunshine, beaches, golf, and low taxes, you went to Florida. But in 2026, that old formula is starting to crack. America is getting older fast. The U.S. population aged 65 and over rose to 61.2 million, up 3.1% in the latest census estimate, and older adults now outnumber children in 11 states. At the same time, the South keeps pulling people in, especially people looking for warmth, lower costs, and a simpler lifestyle. So the big question is no longer just, where is it warm? The real question is, where does retirement still make financial sense? And that is exactly why Florida is the perfect place to start this story. Because Florida is not collapsing, it is not suddenly a bad state. In fact, it is still the single biggest magnet for retirement age movers in America. But the newest migration data shows something much more interesting. Florida is attracting huge numbers of retirees while also losing almost as many. According to AARP's reporting on Hire a Helper's 2025 relocation study, about 45,700 Americans aged 65 and older moved to Florida last year, the most of any state, while nearly 44,900 left, also the most of any state. That does not sound like a retirement paradise with no downside. It sounds like a state people still dream about, but increasingly struggle to afford. And one important caveat here, those retiree move counts come from Hire a Helper's proprietary dataset, not directly from the Census Bureau, so they are best treated as a strong market signal rather than perfect official headcounts. Florida still has very real strengths. It has no individual income tax, which matters a lot when you are living on retirement income and trying to preserve every dollar. It still has some of the best-known retirement communities in the country. And in the 2026 U.S. News Best Places to Retire ranking, 3 Florida places made the top 10. Homosassa Springs at number 3, Spring Hill at number 7, and Palm Coast at number 9. So if someone tells you Florida is finished, that is simply not true. The brand is still powerful. The lifestyle is still attractive. The warmth is still real. The question is not whether Florida has advantages. The question is whether those advantages still justify the bill. Because once you look at the numbers, Florida starts to feel less like the default choice and more like the premium option. Merrick's 2025 cost of living data put Florida at 101.4, slightly above the national average. Zillow's February 2026 housing data shows the average Florida home value at $372,755, which is higher than Texas, South Carolina, and North Carolina. Property taxes are not the worst in this group, but they are not especially low either, with WalletHub estimating an effective rate of 0.76%. And then there is insurance, the issue that keeps coming up over and over again. Realtor.com, citing Florida's Office of Insurance Regulation, reported the average annual homeowner's premium, including wind coverage, at $3,815. For a retiree on a fixed income, that combination changes everything. Florida may still feel like a dream, but it is no longer a cheap dream. And the broader census trend backs that up. Florida still grew, but its net domestic migration in 2025 fell sharply to 22,517. That is way down from 183,646 in 2023 and 310,892 in 2022. In other words, Florida is still adding people, but the effortless momentum it enjoyed a few years ago has faded. Even state officials have been emphasizing market stabilization because they know affordability has become the pressure point. The state has seen more insurers expand, more filings at 0%, and some proposed rate reductions.
That is good news, but stabilization is not the same thing as cheap. Florida today looks less like a bargain retirement haven and more like a lifestyle state that now demands a bigger budget. So if retirees are rethinking Florida, where are they going instead? The clearest surprise winner is South Carolina, and it is not just an anecdotal trend. Census says South Carolina was the fastest growing state in the country between July 2024 and July 2025, growing 1.5%, driven heavily by net domestic migration of 66,622 people. On the retiree side, AARP's summary of the Hire a Helper data says South Carolina led the country in net gain of retirement age migrants, with 5,427 more people age 65 plus moving in than moving out. That is not random, that is a signal. It suggests that when retirees still want warmth and an East Coast feel, but do not want Florida's cost structure, South Carolina increasingly looks like the compromise that makes sense. And the financial case for South Carolina is much easier to understand than the Florida case. Merrick's 2025 Cost of Living Index put South Carolina at 92.7, well below the national average and far below Florida. Zillow's February 2026 figure put the average home value at $300,056, more than $70,000 below Florida. WalletHub estimated South Carolina's effective real estate tax rate at just 0.48%, one of the lowest in the country. It is not a no-income tax state, so this is not some magical tax-fade paradise, but it does offer retirees meaningful deductions, up to $3,000 in qualified retirement income if you are under 65, up to $10,000 if you are 65 or older, and a separate age 65 and older deduction of up to $15,000 that can reduce other taxable income. That is why South Carolina feels so dangerous for Florida in this competition. It does not have to beat Florida on image, it only has to feel similar enough while costing less every month. And there is one more telling detail. AARP reports that of the roughly 14,000 retirement-age adults who moved to South Carolina last year, more than 1 in 8 came from Florida. That is a very specific migration story. These are not just Northeastern retirees choosing the Carolinas over Florida for the first time. Some people are effectively making a second move, stepping back from Florida toward a state that still offers warm weather and coastal access, but with a lower cost base. So South Carolina in this script is not the flashy yacht, it is the quiet assassin. It is the state that wins not by being the dream, but by being the smarter invoice. Then there is Texas, which is a completely different retirement pitch. Texas is not selling palm trees and Atlantic beaches, it is selling scale. No state income tax, large metros, and usually a cheaper entry point into home ownership than Florida. AARP says Texas ranked second both in inbound retiree moves and in net gain, with 24,079 inbound moves and a net gain of 5,156 in 2025. It also helps that Texas keeps showing up in retirement rankings. In the 2026 U.S. News List, the Woodlands ranked 4th and Spring ranked 5th among the best places to retire in America. So Texas is no longer just the state people move to for jobs, it is becoming a retirement destination in its own right. And on first glance, Texas looks extremely compelling. Merrick put Texas at 91.1 on cost of living, making it one of the cheapest states in this comparison. Zillow's February 2026 figure put the average home value at $297,592, slightly lower even than South Carolina. Texas also has no individual income tax. But this is where a lot of people oversimplify the story, because Texas gives with one hand and takes with the other. WalletHub's 2026 property tax comparison estimated Texas at a 1.49% effective real estate tax rate, far above Florida, South Carolina, and North Carolina. And the Texas Department of Insurance reported an average annual homeowner's premium of $3,291 for 2024. So yes, Texas can look cheap when you buy the house, but owning the house is where the state starts billing you back. That makes Texas the most misunderstood state in this whole conversation. It is not the budget paradise that people assume. It is the state for retirees who value no income tax, major healthcare hubs, and a wide range of city options, but who can tolerate high property taxes and often brutal summer heat. If Florida is the premium coastal lifestyle and South Carolina is the quiet value play, Texas is the big market low income tax option. The upside is real. The catch is also real. And if a retiree focuses only on the absence of income tax without pricing in property tax, insurance, and climate, Texas can look better on paper than it feels month to month. Now we get to North Carolina, which may be the least dramatic state on this list, but also the one that might make the most sense for the most people. Census says North Carolina grew by 1.3%.
North Carolina does tax income, but the rate for tax years after 2025 is 3.99%, and the state explicitly allows taxpayers to deduct taxable Social Security benefits from North Carolina income. That is important. It means North Carolina is not a no-tax state, but it is more retiree-friendly than many people assume. But North Carolina also comes with a warning label that people should not ignore. In January 2025, Insurance Commissioner Mike Causey announced a settlement under which the average statewide homeowner's base rate would rise 7.5% on June 1, 2025, and another 7.5% on June 1, 2026. So even the balanced state is seeing cost pressure build. That is a useful reality check because it prevents this from turning into a fantasy list. There is no perfect state anymore. Every attractive destination now comes with some combination of higher insurance, higher housing costs, more traffic, or rising taxes. North Carolina's strength is not perfection. Its strength is that the trade-offs are usually less extreme. So when you step back and compare all 4 states, the map becomes much clearer. Florida is still the classic retirement fantasy, and for people who want that familiar warm weather identity and can afford the premium, it may still be worth it. South Carolina is the strongest value challenger, combining lower housing costs, very low property taxes, and a major inflow of retirees. Texas is the scale play, no income tax, large metros, and relatively affordable homes, but with punishing property taxes and serious heat. North Carolina is the balanced choice, not the cheapest, not the most tax-friendly, not the warmest, but maybe the easiest to live with long-term. And that is why the retirement map of America is changing. The old question used to be, where do I go to retire? The new question is, which trade-off can I actually live with? In the end, Florida is not dead, it is just no longer automatic, and that may be the biggest shift of all.
In 2026, retirees are not simply chasing sunshine. They are pricing out full lifestyles. They are looking at housing, taxes, insurance, healthcare access, and whether their monthly budget still works once the dream becomes real life. That is why South Carolina has momentum to compete instead of simply being assumed. Retirement in America is no longer about finding the warmest place on the map. It is about finding the place where comfort, cost, and common sense still meet.